Hey, I'm with. We're talking about The Performance, new movie from SHIRA Piven, Jeremy Piven, and producer Daniel Finkelman. Right? Yeah, right there. Um, yeah. So I had a chance to see it last night. Fantastic film, and I have a lot of questions about it. But give us the basic story behind The Performance. Sure, you
Yes,
might want to take that one.
I yeah, Jeremy, you can chime in. Um, it's a short story by Arthur Miller and Joyce Piven, who is our mother, who who loves literature, loves short stories, and loves adapting literature for theater. Which is she's an actress, director, teacher, and so she just has a really deep love of short stories, and she found this story, and she thought of Jeremy, and I believe she thought of him in the role of Harold, and she sent him the story, and I heard word of it, was always intrigued by it. I believe I read it, and that was, I think, Jeremy, 10 years ago.
Well, it was about 12 years ago, and yeah, she gave it to me and said, "I think you're going to love this, and I think you could play this role." And we're as artists, we're very delusional, and I speak for myself really when I say that. In the way that here you have this character that's a tap dancer, and I never once thought, "Wait, I don't tap dance." I just immediately thought, I have to play this role. Not to sound too dramatic, but this is why we do what we do, to portray stories like this. And so I was so moved by it. I just thought, I have to do this. And 116 miracles later, here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had to ask you because I mean I'm familiar with Arthur Miller, but I'd never heard of The Performance. And
Yeah,
and then when I do research on it, no one's ever heard of The Performance. And
well,
can you
he's
give a
not a
brief
short
synopsis of the
story.
story and then how you got to make the film?
Well, it's not, he's not known for his short stories. He's a playwright. He's famous for All My Sons, for The Crucible, um, for Death of a Salesman, and he wasn't, actually, his short stories aren't as rich and developed, and they're not really, I would say, as fully realized as his plays. And here was this short story that had this kind of mind-blowing premise. And it was, I think, the premise that hooked us. And I couldn't get the short story out of my mind. And I said to Jeremy, I'd love to adapt this, because I know Jeremy was talking about doing it. We talked about another writer doing it. I think that fell through. And I had just worked with Josh Salzberg. We had collaborated on the movie Welcome to Me, starring Kristen Wiig, written by Elliot Lawrence. And Josh was a writer as well as an editor, and we had such a great collaboration. I said to him, "Do you want to adapt this short story into a film?" And Jeremy's been optioning the rights from the Miller estate for a lot of years. And what if we adapt it? And he said yes, and we did it. And first draft, we showed it to Jeremy, who, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was a little skeptical, like, I don't know if you guys are the right people for this. Anyway, he fell in love with it. And yeah, 116 miracles later, Daniel stepped up, and I think had that same feeling, and wanted this to be a movie.
Mhm. And then how does it come together? I don't know if there's a studio behind it, but it's I'm always interested. We represent a lot of independent filmmakers, and the big story is always, how do you get this train rolling? How, especially when you don't have the big backers behind it. I mean, was that a struggle? Was just getting that first shot done
Right.
a big
Well,
adventure?
I mean, I can tell a struggle is an understatement. But I
Yeah.
will tell you, I mean, when Jeremy first spoke to me about this, to me and my producing partner Chaya on the phone about this, yeah, it was contagious. His passion was really contagious. The way he described it was the best pitch I've ever heard in my life. And I told him I need 24 hours, and I came back to him and I was like, dude, I'm in. I don't know how we're gonna do this. Oh, and God help us, we had no idea what kind of struggles are waiting for us, but here we are. We made it happen at the end.
Yeah. So let me, before I get to the role of Harold, can I ask you, how far does the short story go in your story, or is the whole movie about, encapsulate in that short story? Or did you have to add a lot to it?
The short story is kind of an outline, and it's been even a while. I probably should pick it up and read it again, but I really, it's really a character that I always thought of as Arthur Miller, who interviews Harold May, the character of Harold, in a bar. And we even considered, should we do it like an interview? And that's been done before. Something about it wasn't exciting to me. The idea of sort of keeping that sort of, I see as an Arthur Miller character who's the journalist interviewing this ambitious Jewish American tap dancer who found himself in Nazi Germany tap dancing for, the scariest possible person. But that format of interview, sitting at a bar, casual, the story sort of strikes you, I think, in the original as a true story. And everyone who reads it is like, is it true? Is it a true story? And there's that kind of like real germ of something that feels so real that inspired the rest of it. But a lot of it was created. The troupe was alluded to. The love story was barely alluded to. And we really we had to flesh out these characters and flesh out the character of Fugler, which is kind of in a weird way. And Jeremy, you can jump in, the kind of the love story, that relationship between Fugler, or it's another love, there's a particular romance between Fugler and Harold that I think is really unique, between the German Nazi and a Jewish American tap dancer who's not even open about his Jewishness until he is confronted within himself and has to admit that he's Jewish.
Yeah. I got to bring up Fugler for a moment. First of all, didn't even recognize that it was Robert Carlile. But there's a line in the film where it's the discussion of art and politics that he doesn't want to talk politics, but he wants to talk about art, because I think the line was essentially art unifies. Can you expand upon that a little bit in terms of how its place in the story?
First of all, art does unify, and Robert Carlile, I had always been a huge fan of his. And then I went and met him, and we sat down together, and there was this other dimension to him that I witnessed in person that I thought if he could access for Fugler, it would give this character layers that, for instance, when I was speaking to Rebecca Miller, Arthur Miller's son, about her giving me the rights to this, her husband, Daniel Day-Lewis, was in the background cueing her on different questions to ask, and they obviously collaborate together in many ways. And
I didn't even know that. Yeah,
that's a powerful couple there.
I mean, and he's the greatest living actor, and so it was incredibly intimidating. And Robert, and yet I can't imagine anyone doing it better than what Robert did in this film, and I really mean that. He had such layers to this character. It could have easily been a one-note villain. And I just thought it was really important that, my character in a way be seduced by him. And there's something very sweet and accessible about Robert that he accessed for this character, and ultimately we're giving all these qualities, and he reveals himself to be a Nazi. So, it's very, very heavy and layered. And I think this film is really accessible to everyone and anyone, because it asks the questions: how far would you go in your life? How much of yourself would you compromise to be successful? And I think that's something that we deal with every day. I mean, look, you don't want to be on this Zoom call with us. You're being tortured right now, and yet you have to do it in order to progress. No, I kid. Um,
I would characterize it as that.
but this is the you know the ultimate conundrum for anyone, and that's one of the many reasons why we're all here and why we had to make this film. Uh,
Yeah, the Robert, his first really big scene was that scene in the dressing room where he comes in, surprises Harold is taking off his makeup, and they've just had this kind of wonderful, super entertaining tap dance number, and clearly this guy Fugler has been just blown away by the performance, and he comes backstage to talk to Harold about doing this one special show in Berlin. And I remember we were all, we were squeezed into this dressing room that was sort of at first a compromise to a set that we couldn't quite afford. And our production designers were so amazing that production designer and the set decorator, just unbelievable, transformed this dressing room, and it had such character. But I was sort of squeezed into the back and looking on the monitor, and I actually, and so was Josh, or my co-writer, and we watched the scene between Jeremy and Robert Carlile, and we both independently, in different little squeezed corners, we both got teary watching it, because it was like that character of Fugler arrived, and the chemistry between them it was really, it was a genuine moment of revelation, of like it took us a long time to really cast that role the way, to find an actor who could play opposite Jeremy, and how powerful an actor Jeremy is on screen. And it was like that character that we had been living with for so long on the page really just kind of came to life at that moment. And the two of them together was really, it was something really wonderful.
One thing that personally that I like about movies, or what I consider great movies, are, it's the ability to engage with a character. And I think this is where Harold comes in, but it's the idea of, a man who's conflicted between pursuing his own personal dreams and desires versus, at what cost, at the cost of the greater good. And
Exactly.
And I think we've lost that in these last few years in terms of good storytelling, in a way of saying, look, we're all flawed. We all have our selfish desires, and at some point, life is gonna come to a head here. Is that kind of what you saw in the Harold character, Jeremy?
well, completely. And the fact that you have a lead character that is very open to the rest of his troupe and himself about the fact that he will really do anything to progress and be successful, um, at all costs. And tap dancing. This is 1937. He's not. They're not doing that well. Tap dancing is this brilliant art that still today, isn't, I don't think, really fully compensated, in a fair way. But so he wants to have a family, and he wants to evolve, and he can't do it monetarily, and so he's in a tough position. And you have to understand, one of the brilliant things about this story and this timeline is we've never seen this before. We've never seen just 1937, just before the Holocaust, and we have an idea of the horrors of Hitler, but not fully yet. So Harold is willing to jump in there and engage, and the rest of his troop are terrified, and he's looking at them going, no, we have to do this. And the story plays out so beautifully, and I know Shira was being sarcastic earlier, but I remember reading the script just thinking, this is incredible, this is so good, wait, is it this good? And then you have to read it again. Shira and I come from a background where a lot of it is improvisational. we do a lot of story theater, and so we live to improvise. And I didn't even think, there were times when it just kind of came out, but when a script is this good, you want to just kind of inhabit the text.
Mm-hmm. So how do you, knowing all that, develop that character? What were, I think one thing about your performance is that it's not about the words the character says. It's not about the dialogue, but it's about the performance, about the look on your face, your body language, and seeing all that conflict within the the unsaid parts of your character. What was your process in developing that character?
Well, thank you for noticing that. Yeah, and here we are at the Rome Film Festival, and I'm really curious because I think this is one of these films that is going to be accessible to anyone, even if you don't speak the language. Because I agree with you. I mean, I'm kind of known for characters like Ari Gold that are very effusive and have 4-page monologues. And believe it or not, this character has less dialogue than almost any character I've ever played. So you're right. He is navigating through this world and not saying a lot. And so, it may sound very pretentious, but you have to just be totally present and be navigating through this world. And that was just a gift. I mean, when you're looking at a character and he's in an actual Nazi uniform, it's heavy, man. It is heavy. It's all you can do, just to hold it together. So, the givens of this script and our history, it was enough that if I'm totally present and I'm not able to pull that off, I need to go into roofing. I need to retire. I need to, you know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, seriously, man, it's something that an actor, this is a once in a lifetime moment.
Yeah. I mean, I have to think that, if for anyone who wants to make Hollywood the dream and seek the fame and the fortune, I think, the film points out the temptations, the compromises one has to make. And I think that's I think one of the most foundational parts of the story.
And it's about a tap dancer, and it's about a Jewish tap dancer. It's about a Jewish American tap dancer, and it's set in a specific period. But my feeling is always the more specific you can be about the character, the more universal it becomes in a way. Because you feel his humanity. And Jeremy, honestly, he has so many layers to the emotions that he goes through in the journey of who Harold is. And that was really observant of you, I think, and a testament to his performance. That there, it's in a way that, this may sound pretentious, but it comes to mind. It's a little bit like playing an instrument, but there were so many different colors that Jeremy got from Harold's, from the story that unfolds as Harold goes through these events and gets kind of put through the events that would happen in that period. I mean, he sits with his troupe in the one right after he meets Fugler, who offers him this more money than they've ever seen to go to Berlin, Germany, right on the cusp of things, right on the cusp of the seminal events that led to the war. Like, it was 1937 and 1938 was Kristallnacht. And there had been yellow stars. There had been Jewish businesses shut down. And I asked a lot of people. I asked our uncle who died 2 years ago. He was 95. And I said, I asked him, obviously before he died, while we were still working on the movie, I said, what did people know in that period? And his feeling was, we knew everything. We knew. I was like, there wasn't internet. There wasn't, there was radio. There wasn't TV there. And he said he really felt like, because his older brother, our uncle, who we never met, Uncle Jerome, he enlisted in the war because as a Jewish man, he wanted to go, and American living in Pennsylvania, he wanted to go and fight the Nazis. And he felt that he had to do it. And he knew enough to know that that's what he was going to go do. But Harold, Harold was a little bit more sheltered. He was a tap dancer. He was just focused on making it. He needed it for his identity. He needed it for his livelihood. He was kind of at the end of his career, and he was going to risk going into Nazi Germany. And it's important to know that the concentration camps weren't really, they had not fully been established at that time. The war had not started. So it wasn't the same kind of risk as if he went, if they were in the middle of World War II. But it was a very particular kind of risk, full of a lot of unknowns.
Yeah. And he hid behind the fact that he was an American as some form of protection as well.
Exactly. He says it. He says, I'm an American. You can't do this to me. Yeah. I'm an American. And also, he had spent his life kind of not really owning his Jewishness. And that's a big part of the story. He was blonde. He says at one point, I could always pass. My sister couldn't. She had a head full of dark curls. I could always pass. And he doesn't really examine that. It seems to serve him until the moment of reckoning. And that's really where the heart of the movie is. And that at that moment of reckoning.
Yeah. I mean, my daughter is reading Night right now for school.
Oh, Ellie Wiesel, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy. But it is that idea of, because it is set just before things started to come down. And I think the thing about the movie that I kept thinking to myself is, what would I do? Because it's real easy to look in hindsight and say, yeah, horrible things are about to happen. But to wonder if, is it really going to happen? Are the rumors of Hitler really true? And to then cloud that with the idea of, potential wealth and riches and success that Harold is presented in the film.
Yeah. Can I add? I mean, when I came on board, I was definitely thinking, I'm going to be producing this film, and it's beautiful, obviously. And I'm a grandson of Holocaust survivor myself, Holocaust survivors myself. And for me, it was very important to capture, like Jeremy and Shira said, it's not necessarily the Holocaust, but how it was before then, from a perspective of an American. But lo and behold, this is, all I can say is it came to a point where literally 2 days ago, my daughter, my 18-year-old daughter, is asking me, is it safe for her to walk down the street? And we're in Brooklyn. This is not 1937. This is 2023. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, it's very personal. And I'll give you an example. I mean, the actor that portrays Bix in the film, his name is Yaniv Biton. He was supposed to be with us in Rome, and we actually even booked him a room, and he already had his flights. But then he canceled, and he won't be joining us, unfortunately. And when I asked him why, he said that he unfortunately couldn't make it. He was afraid to leave his 2 kids because his ex-neighbor, his neighbor's 2 kids are hostage right now in Gaza. And he's just afraid for his own kids, and, he doesn't know if he leaves to Rome, if he's just too afraid. He doesn't know what's going to happen to his own kids. And those 2 kids, that are held hostage, we don't know if they're alive. We don't know if they're starving, and God forbid worse, obviously. And by the way, definitely our hearts and minds are with Yaniv and his family and all the hostages. So it's pretty, and this is, I don't want to turn this political, because it's not. It's just it's just pretty powerful how at this point I'm like, yeah, these are decisions that we have to make, strong decisions of showing solidarity, of making choices. And this is happening right now, literally.
Yeah, it to me, the division that's happening in this country is mind-boggling, because I've never seen it like this, as this bad before. I mean, what's the temperature like in Rome, the Rome Film Festival where you're at? Do you think? I have to believe that they're open to it because they're showing it, but are you are you experiencing anything that that's just out of the ordinary, I guess?
Well, we just arrived, so we don't know yet. I think that's a really good question, and I think we have to keep our ears open. But yeah, Daniel,
Yeah, I mean, I want to believe that most people condemn terrorism, condemn Hamas, condemn any loss of innocent lives out there. And I don't care who it is. Innocent kids that die are shouldn't be. But personally, being an Israeli as an Israeli citizen, as an American citizen, I'll give you another example. A friend of mine, I've been in Israel a couple of months ago, and I have a friend who's a film director as well, as a filmmaker, who was murdered 2 weeks ago by Hamas in front of his wife. And I put a post out there supporting him, supporting Israel, and I get mixed messages from all over. Some say, you're right. Some say, some is hate mail. And I'm like, why? Why is me showing support to my people, to innocent people that died, that didn't do anything? Why is that a bad thing? So, but I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that people's mind and hearts are in the right places and they know what's right and wrong.
Well, I mean, and this is kind of at the heart of why I wanted to make this film, because I think this film is accessible to anyone. And you know, people want to know why aren't you entering the conversation? This is how I can contribute to the conversation. I'm an actor, I'm a performer, and through this performance, this is the best way that I can contribute. Because when I read this story, I just thought there's no better way to illustrate how preposterous it is, how insane it is to hate another person because of their religion, heritage, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that blind hate is. And this is the beauty of this story. This story is accessible to anyone, and anyone could take a look at these guys and fall kind of for either one of them, and go along and see this chemistry, and then it takes this turn that people are not expecting, and then that's when they start listen, and it'll sound again very pretentious, but if you can make a story that will have people question who they are, where do they stand, what's going on with them, that is something, as Shakespeare says, devoutly to be wished for. And I do really believe that this film does that. There are people, we had a friend, Shira and I had a friend, this African American, who just was, he was angry at my character for doing what he did, but then he said, I could see why he did what he did. You know what I mean? Because we all have, this, we're all ambitious, you know, and some of us are a bit of a slave to our ambition. How far will that, how much trouble will that get us into? You know what I mean? So I think, unfortunately, this movie could not be more timely.
Yeah, the timing is absolutely interesting, to
Yeah,
say
I
the
mean
least.
it's actually it was timely before the events,
Yeah.
the really tragic events in Israel, and now
Yeah.
it's even more timely. And yeah, thanks for sharing that, Daniel. I actually was just wondering about Yaniv and was
Yeah, he was supposed to come. He had a flight and a hotel room, but I spoke to him on the phone. He was in a shelter while rockets were flying outside his home. This is the reality that we live in today, 2023. It's pretty, but like Jeremy said, and I have to agree, this is our weapon. This is our platform.
yes.
When you open the news today, when you open social media, all you see is hate, evil, death, and there's a pornography of death that's happening right now. There's no light, barely any light, and what we try to create with this film is a little light in this darkness. And mind you, this is not, like we said, this is not a Holocaust film. It's very entertaining and funny and enjoyable until it's not. but the message resonates very much, and it's as relevant as ever.
And that's something I think is really important, that the contradiction, seemingly superficially a contradiction between a movie that takes place in this period, a movie that has that sort of heaviness of a Jew coming to having to come to face his own identity at the most absurd and poignant moment in his relationship with this Nazi, who is actually a kind of a conduit to his success. In the middle of all this, there's 4 big tap numbers. So the contradiction of the entertainment with the heavy story is kind of a beautiful mix, because the tap, we never wanted, I as a director never wanted to be like, let's stop and do a dance number. This is part of his life. This is who Harold is. So we see him in motion. We see him performing. We see his performances on stage, and then we see the layers of his performance that he needs to do to get through his life as well. But I think the tap dance element is not to be downplayed either.
No, and by the way, it took me 10 years of studying tap to be even capable enough to attempt to pull this off. But I've been a drummer my whole life, and that's really what saved me, is because I can count it all off, and I can always know rhythmically where, how to stick the landing and where we're going. And Shira knows that the choreography was, incredibly challenging to me. But I mean, think about this. Jared Grimes, who was our brilliant choreographer, black guy who, that's where tap comes from, and that's where we learned it from. So if you think about all the different types of people involved, and we have a female director, and here we all are working together. Shira and I, my mother gave me the script, and my mother was our acting teacher. So it's all a kind of, we're all kind of tied together in this. There's a lot of layers to unpack to this story. And people, it's funny, when they see it with me, they go, how did you pull that character off? How did you inhabit that role? And what's interesting is that, forgive me for even getting into this conversation, but people don't know who I am. And so if you've seen Ari Gold, which I played for a decade, you may go, oh, okay, that's him. Yeah, he's the guy that screams and loses his mind to his assistant, and he's the abrasive loudmouth agent. And they say, how did you pull off Harold May? And it's and by the way, and I thank you for not asking this question, because the question that I always get is, how much are you like Ari Gold? And the reality is, that's a compliment. I think when you play a character authentically, people are like, well, how much you like that? And with Harold May, it's like, it was a dream to inhabit him, and completely natural, because I feel for his journey. Yeah. I really do. I really identify with this character more than any other character I've played. So I look forward to anyone asking me, how much are you like Harold May? Because it was all I can do to hold it together playing this guy. I really identified with him.
Yeah. I mean, not being an actor myself, I would imagine being able to connect with elements of a character just makes it that easy. I would just want to comment about your tap dancing, though. Singing in the Rain is my number 3 all-time movie. It's not Singing in the Rain, but it definitely showed that you put the work in, and that everything felt authentic in terms of, the fact that it was on a small stage like that, and that there was a definite purpose to the dance that you were doing. And I have to say that, to me, it just, it looked like you had been tap dancing for a very long time. And I think you have a stage career. So I kind of chalked it up to that as well.
Well, it all helps, I mean, I've been doing stand-up comedy, and I've been on stage since I was 8 years old, and, decades of stage time doesn't mean that you can then go and be a stand-up comic. And it doesn't mean that you can do, you could be a tap dancer. I wanted to pick the hardest things that one could do in this life and just attack them, you know.
Tap isn't easy. That's the other.
But yeah, I mean, Shira heard how, I was, it's humbling to say the least, to attempt to do something as beautiful and as difficult as tap. It really is. And Jared, our choreographer, who did just a brilliant job, and he really cares about the history of tap and getting it right.
Yeah, we
And so,
wanted to make sure that the tap was there. Depending on the era, tap dancing had a different quality, was stylistically different from era to era. So, Savion Glover in in the 90s and the early 2000s was all about the feet. Everything was about the feet. And there wasn't, and in the 20s, 30s into the 40s, there was a lot of upper body, there was a lot of dance in tap. And so Jared was an expert in that period, and he really did it justice. He captured the feel of that period really well, and
so authentically, to the point where they were very patient with me because I was begging them. It was like torture watching these dance sequences without our proper sound. And I've made 80 movies, and this is the first time I produced, and my God, you need patience, because I was just like, waiting for that moment where the sound was inserted, and as my mom, who taught us, said, every beat counts. In acting and performing and everything, and every beat counts with this film. And once you have all the layers in there and you can hear the sound of us tapping, if you just saw the visuals, because he did it so authentically, it's not nearly what it could be. And if you saw it without the sound, for me, it's like torture. You gotta have it all in. And once you have it all in, my God, it just sings, it flies. And it was really difficult, man. I'm not gonna lie to you. But so
I mean,
gratifying.
the worst thing you can say is, "Oh, here's the actor who learned to dance for this movie," and that doesn't come across at all. And I, like I said, Saint Rain is my third time all favorite movie, and I think I can kind of see the fact that you put the work in and tried to make it look authentic. Let me ask you one last question about Harold, and then one question to follow up with that. One of the elements of the character was the idea of hiding who he was, and I feel like in Hollywood, people who want to find fame, clout, power in Hollywood, they're constantly hiding who they are. Can you speak to that about the character?
Well, it's a great question. I think fame is a very dangerous drug, and I think that it can be addictive, and people can chase it, and it can be overwhelming to some, and so. But with Harold, it's interesting because with Harold, and this again, you're gonna listen to an actor talk about his motivation. This is the part where people will literally fall asleep and use this to help them fall asleep. But the motivation of Harold May is, he wants a family, and he wants, he definitely loves his art and wants to perform, and wants for people to see him perform, and his own family doesn't believe that it's a noble profession, and so that's difficult, and he wants to prove himself to himself and his family and everyone else, and he knows. And here's this guy that comes backstage and says, "You're a great artist." It's like, it's funny because Shira's my sister and the director, so I would like beg her to like, I really want this moment in there, like when Fugler says, you're a great artist, like that means everything to Harold. He needs to hear that. When and people put all their energy into something in this life and it means so much to them, they want to be seen and heard and felt. So Harold in 1937, this is before social media. This is before, you can really be celebrated the way it is now. Celebrities being celebrated, and it's gotten out of hand, completely. But with Harold, it's he wants to get his shot, and this is his shot, and it's this amazing tragic story. How far will you go? He's and yet, this guy that's giving him his shot, truly he wanted to be an artist, and he's seeing in Harold what he wanted to be, and their stories mirror each other because they're both ambitious and climbing up the ladder. So there's so much going on at the same time. um, so with Harold, yes, the motivation is he wants to be successful, and he wants to work on the biggest stages and to be compensated finally, as he says.
And
um,
and you asked that question about how does that kind of is it seemed like you were asking, is there a parallel with being in Hollywood? And
Mhm.
you alluded to actors maybe hiding who they are, but I think people have this idea that, I don't know, that when there of course are differences when you're living in the spotlight, um, but I think that there are universals to that need for success. I don't think it's necessarily. I think that was a really interesting question, and yet I also think that it's, again, it goes back to, it's a universal, that people, when people want to succeed, they will often hide some part of themselves. So I think we all have a level of shame that we're hiding. There's often we think that, oh, we're going to get found out, someone's going to find me out, whether you're working as as a computer programmer, or you're working as, I don't as an actor in Hollywood, or you're working in a corporation. I think often people have that feeling that they need to hide who they are. And that's the part I think that is so relatable about Harold, is that part of us that we want to hide who we are in order to have that success. And we think we have to look shiny, and we have to hide our flaws. And it's that moment when Harold realizes he has to be entirely who he is, that to me is the most moving part of the movie, that I think is really hard to not relate to. And it's not about being, it's all about being Jewish at that moment. And it's not at all about being Jewish.
Yeah,
It's about
Yeah.
revealing a hidden part of yourself.
absolutely.
Yeah. And can I just add that
Yeah.
what you said, you asked me before about Rome. I was debating, should I be telling people about my nationality, about the fact that I'm also part of an Israeli citizen. Maybe it's not a good time right now to make that public. But then I made a decision, you know, at the press conference or whatnot that we're having, I'm actually going to be wearing a yarmulke. That was my decision, actually. Well, usually I don't wear a yarmulke. I said, I'm going to wear a yarmulke and be proud of who I am. So this is the message that this film is trying, like we said, don't hide who you are. It's okay. You'll get whatever you want. People are more attracted to you when you don't hide, when you are exactly who you are.
Yeah, we have a friend of the channel who basically says authenticity is the new currency, and
Nice.
I like to
Love that.
believe that that's going to be true in the next
I'm
few
going to
years.
use that. Love that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting, this story that we're revealing, because and by the way, that's a great question, because sometimes you see certain actors in Hollywood, and maybe they don't think that they're enough, and
Yeah.
so they think that if they just keep waking up in the morning, how do I stay on top? Got to keep going, got to keep going. I'm number one. And so then if they get that fame and that, if they're celebrated in that way, and they then they'll feel like they're enough. And in this story, it's a great metaphor. He's hiding who he is for fame, but then comes to term with who he is. We obviously can't say the ending,
Yes.
but
No.
I love the whole bittersweet
Mhm.
nature of the ending. I just think it's beautiful. It's, to me, so satisfying, because any other way would have been a cop out with this film. It's just a beautiful way to end, to see what comes from all this. What are the ramifications of hiding who you are, and possibly facing death for success.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Much success to the performance and in your appearance at Rome Film Festival. And I do thank you for spending time with me. This is a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for taking
so
the time.
much.